Chapter 4. As the years passed, the Ordered Dragons expanded their dominion, yet Vyranoth remained unconvinced of the aspect's cause. Still, she made a point to visit Alexstrasza and the broodlands when she could, if only to stay appraised of the aspect's activities. Today, Vyranoth's heart soared as she swooped over the waking shores, on her way to meet Alexstrasza's newest clutch of whelps. There are few pleasures so gentle as meeting newborn whelplings, natural born or ordered. The sun shone bright, warming her scales and filling her with a youthful, long-forgotten exuberance. She tucked her wings and dived through a red stone arch, enjoying the feeling of temporary weightlessness, then stretched them wide to cover the breeze. Dipping lower, she trailed her back talons into a river, startling a flock of ducks into flight. The whole world smelled alive. Flowers burst with the spring season, and fresh grass danced in the breeze. The broodlands flourished under Alexstrasza's reign, and yet Vyranoth found herself no more willing to join the flights than before. Out of respect for Alexstrasza, Vyranoth had given order magic due consideration. The dragonflight's fledgling civilization seemed inherently good, even honorable. She had watched their development with great interest, wondering if they would stay true to the lofty ideals upon which they had been founded. Indeed, they fulfilled the commands of their masters with single-minded zeal, and that was precisely the problem. Vyranoth valued her agency, her free will, her ability to go where and when she desired. The Ordered enjoyed no such freedom, having pledged themselves to the building up of the dragonflights and the defense of the world at large. And as much as she loved her friend, she needed no queen to do her thinking for her. Iridicron was a little better than the aspects themselves, altering himself for the sake of power. More than a century ago, he'd taken to calling himself an incarnate, positioning himself to be the dragonkind's best hope to remain free of the aspectral threat. He courted Vyranoth's favor incessantly, almost obsessively at times, sending his emissaries and promising her a place by his side. Only one time had he come to her himself, in the year after the aspects completed their work on Wyrmrest Temple. "I will ask you to join me but once," he said to her. "Deny me, and I shall not trouble you again." Vyranoth said nothing to him, still unsure of her own heart. The struggle between aspect and incarnate left her in an unenviable position. She neither wanted to be ordered nor wished to be imbued with the planet's elemental energies, especially given the process's low rate of survival. She had grown lonely, then she had grown tired of being lonely, but that did not drive her into the wings of either faction. Under the influence of order magic, dragonkind aspired to things Vyranoth simply did not understand. Over the last 200 years, Valdraken's tower and spires had risen over the mountains of Theladris. In the northwest, Neltharion had built a massive citadel and forge, where he and the Black Dragonflight manufactured all manner of strange wonders. On the western shores, Ysera and her greens claimed to have opened a portal into Azeroth's own dreams. And in the south, Malagos and his blues had built towers and vast, what was the word for them? Libraries? They filled these places with knowledge recorded in stone and parchment from which future generations would learn. Vyranoth had even touched Malagos' grand tower of Vakthros, as well as the beginning of the Bronze Dragonflight's temporal conflicts. Chief among them all was Alexstrasza's ruby life pools, the seat of the Red Dragonflight's power. The life pools rested in the heart of the broodlands, protected on all sides. They provided a place for whelplings to hatch, grow, and play, with no fear of predation. Every whelpling in the broodlands had a chance to reach their full potential. There was joy and hope in the thought, but also power. In a few generations' time, the dragonflight's populations might outstrip the primal dragon's numbers. The thought both astonished and terrified Vyranoth. Rising from the canyon, she spotted the pool's familiar butt in the distance. Red dragons shimmered in the air around it, and gleaming pillars of marble rose from its summit. Titan-forged workers scurried across scaffolding and moved enormous stone blocks into place. How odd, Vyranoth thought. I thought the ruby life pools were complete. What are they building now? As she drew herself closer, a flash of crimson caught her eye. The Dragon Queen had taken wing. Light blazed off Alexstrasza's ruby scales and gilded horns. Though Vyranoth had grown accustomed to seeing Alexstrasza in her ordered form, it still unsettled her from time to time. The chasm between them mostly went unspoken, but it seemed to have grown wider with each passing decade. "Vyranoth!" Alexstrasza cried, doing a joyful, elegant roll in the air. "How good it is to see you, my dear! Tell me, how have you fared of late?" "Very well," Vyranoth replied, halting to hover in the air. You are positively glowing. I take it all in the broodlands as well. Indeed, Alexstrasza replied. We have been busy in the decades you've been away. I can see that, Vyranoth replied, peering at the polished creations below. What are you up to now, my old friend? We're adding an upper tier to the ruby life pools, Alexstrasza replied. Our flights have been so prolific, we need new space for eggs. Come, let us fly and I will show you. Very well, Vyranoth replied, but she smiled a little. Today, Vyranoth and Alexstrasza cruised around the ruby life pools, enjoying the beauty of the day and the warm, gentle winds. Below them, the Titanforge were constructing open-air pools atop the structure, which were fed from the aqueduct that carried water from Tierhold. Green dragons coaxed trees to grow, giving shade to the new pools, while the reds oversaw construction of a new landing platform. Near the ground, young red drakes minded the whelplings, chasing them through the leafy crimson treetops. The whelplings' giggles echoed through the canyons. The sound brought another smile to Vyranoth's lips. I have wanted to expand these pools for decades, Alexstrasza said with a hint of excitement in her voice. I had to prioritize the construction of Valdrakken, then send resources to fortify our borders, but now I can finally bring my vision to life. Why should you need to fortify the borders of the broodlands? Vyranoth asked with a little chuckle. They banked under the bones of a new archway, one inland with gold and opalescent stained glass. Who would dare challenge the might of the aspects? Alexstrasza shot her friend a wry smile. Neltharion takes his charge to defend the broodlands serious. Perhaps a little too seriously at times. Have you seen the Obsidian Citadel? Ah, you mean the monument he built to his own towering intellect, Vyranoth said playfully, drawing a guilty-sounding chuckle from the Dragon Queen. Not everyone is as open-minded as you, my friend, Alexstrasza said. I will always advocate for peace, but I do not trust my detractors will do the same. We do not know the dangers we face in the future. Ah, so you do understand the threat of Ridicron poses to you, Vyranoth thought. Even if you will not name the threat aloud, you know the incarnates grow in strength just as you do. Razageth had been a particular thorn in Alexstrasza's side, as the Storm Eater had delighted in striking down ordered dragons along the Broodlands' borders. Razageths sometimes flew past Vyranoth's eyrie in the frozen fangs, reveling in the power of the tempest there. If conflict broke out between the aspects and incarnates, Vyranoth would grapple to maintain her neutrality. Her affection for Alexstrasza was undeniable. However, the intervening centuries had not made Vyranoth trust the Keepers or their magic. Nor did she trust the incarnates, though she certainly empathized with some of their rhetoric. Vyranoth's best hope was peace. Enough talk of philosophy, Alexstrasza said with a smile. Come, I would now introduce you to my new whelplings. Alexstrasza folded her wings and dived into the hollow center of the ruby life pools. Vyranoth followed her down, plummeting past bursts of leafy green foliage and silvery waterfalls. At the bottom, Alexstrasza alighted on a lily-shaped landing pad, one that floated in a shallow pool. Vyranoth settled beside her friend, shaking the condensation of the waterfalls from her wings. The droplets felt almost warm. They tingled along her wings' membranes until she shucked them away. The temperature rose as they ventured into the ruby life pools proper. Alexstrasza led Vyranoth into a cavern that housed several large clutches of dragon eggs, red, black, blue, bronze, and green, all of which rested in clear turquoise pools. Lush flora thrived in the heat and humidity, filling the whole space with greenery. Warm golden light radiated from sconces in the walls. Draken had tended the eggs in the pools, singing to them in low, soft tones, telling them stories and cradling them in strange magic Vyranoth did not comprehend. As Alexstrasza moved deeper into the space, every Draken had turned and bowed to her. She acknowledged them with a nod, saying, "As you were," then strode onward. A few of the egg tenders looked at Vyranoth warily, but said nothing. I believe they will be sleeping, Alexstrasza said, as she approached a thick curtain of ivory vines. She nudged it aside, revealing a private pool, one filled with gigantic lily pads and delicate glowing blossoms. Two newly hatched whelps slept on a thick, velvety pad, their scales as soft as dragonfly wings. The whelps' golden irises moved back and forth under their translucent lids as they dreamed, and an ornate fountain bubbled a lullaby. Vyranoth breathed deep, inhaling the whelp's sweet, yolky scent. The whelps curled together for security, but one boy had rolled away, sleeping on his back and kicking one tiny leg into the air. With a gentle trill, Alexstrasza nudged him back to his siblings. She nuzzled them, then blew a hot breath over their sleeping forms. One whelp, still snoring, reached up and placed a tiny forepaw on Alexstrasza's snout. Oh, they are beautiful, Vyranoth said in a hushed voice, realizing that she missed having whelps of her own. Her throat tightened as she said congratulations. The sudden rush of emotion took Vyranoth by surprise, particularly longing and want, tinged with something that was almost jealousy. Vyranoth hadn't had a clutch of her own in centuries, nor had she taken a new mate since Galakron slew her last one. Thank you, Alexstrasza said, smiling at the new whelplings. Vyranoth stepped back from her emotions, examining them, confused by them. Jealousy was not something a dragon like Vyranoth experienced. She possessed a keen intellect, powerful ice magic, and excellent acuity of the air. Larger than most primal dragons, Vyranoth commanded respect and admiration from her peers. She wanted for nothing. Though she was inclined to solitude, she had never lacked for friends or allies. At least until now. Who was left for Vyranoth? So many dragonkind's best had gone to Alexstrasza and the aspects. Most who remained now followed Eretacron and spouted his fractious rhetoric, leaving Vyranoth caught in the midst of a growing storm. Precious few remained neutral, and those who had were too young and inexperienced, or who had paired off and flown far, seeking escape from the tension between the two groups. Yes, Vyranoth was jealous of Alexstrasza, and self-aware enough to realize that jealousy had started to gnaw away at her heart. If left to fester, it would turn to anger, hatred. She wanted what Alexstrasza had, not just a mate, not just a clutch, but a place in the world. Eventually she would have to choose, aspect or incarnate, order or nature. She knew the choice wasn't upon her yet, but it stalked closer by the day. Vyranoth? Alexstrasza asked, pulling the frost dragon from her thoughts. Are you all right? The concerned Dragon Queen's face was true. The drawn brows, the neutral lips, the slightly narrowed eyes, but Vyranoth couldn't bring herself to be honest or vulnerable with Alexstrasza. Try as she might, the Dragon Queen would not understand the conflict raging in Vyranoth's heart, and she was loath to put her struggles on Alexstrasza today, thus dampening her friend's joy. Vyranoth touched her snout to Alexstrasza's shoulder. It is wistfulness for a past that I cannot forget and nothing more, my friend. Alexstrasza held Vyranoth's gaze for several moments, searching her eyes. Vyranoth felt as though her chest had been laid upon, and that Alexstrasza could see every beat of her heart. It was unsettling, unnerving. At long last, Alexstrasza smiled and leaned into Vyranoth's side. We have been friends through all the long centuries, Vyranoth. You know you can tell me anything, don't you? I do, Vyranoth said, leaning into Alexstrasza. Anything but this. As Alexstrasza attended her official duties that afternoon, Vyranoth lingered in the broodlands, playing with the older whelps. You can't find me, a little Tyrannus giggled from the branches of a nearby tree. Vyranoth stood on an egg tender's path nearby, pretending not to know where the whelplings hid. Two red whelplings perched on her head, Alexstrasza and Alexstrasza. A blue whelpling, Rigos, toddled in the air near Vyranoth's left shoulder, his tiny wings barely able to keep him aloft. He's up there, Alexstrasza said, bouncing atop Vyranoth's head. Look in that tree. Which tree? Vyranoth said, pretending to be confused. She turned her great head from side to side, then pointed at a tree across the river with a large winged talon. Is it that one? No, the whelplings cried in unison. Vyranoth said, cocking her head. She turned round and pointed at another. What about that one? The whelplings howled with laughter. Alexstrasza jumped into the air, fumbled for a moment, then managed to maneuver himself in front of Vyranoth's snout. Here, I'll show you, he said, motioning to her with one of his forefeet. With a chuckle, Vyranoth followed the whelplings to the tree, while Alexstrasza, and Rigos flew up into the branches, giggling and calling Tyrannus's name. The little green ones squawked, and four of them burst from the tree in an explosion of leaves. Tyrannus took a tumble, but Vyranoth extended her wings and caught him on the thick, soft membrane. Vyranoth had often played these kind of games with her own clutches. It taught whelplings how to use sound to search for their prey, how to hide themselves to avoid being seen, and how to hunt alone in groups. Vyranoth had to admit it was a delight to spend time with the whelplings, even if they were not her own. Inexplicably, there were fewer whelplings in the dragon wilds these days. Who wants to hide next? Vyranoth asked, bouncing a Tyrannus back into the air. Alexstrasza? No, Alexstrasza said, landing on Vyranoth's head and hiding in the frost dragon's thick mane. I'm too scared to be alone. What? Vyranoth asked with a chuckle. Why would you be afraid, little one? I want to stay with you, Alexstrasza said. Bemused, Vyranoth replied, Well, I suppose you can help me look, Alexstrasza. I don't want to hide either, the little red one dashed under Vyranoth's wing. They might take me. What are you talking about? Vyranoth said with a forced chuckle. In all her years, she had never seen whelplings act like this, and their fears gave her pause. "The eyes in the rocks," Alexstrasza said in muffled voice, gripping the primal dragon's mane in her tiny talons. Vyranoth looked at a nearby red draconid. The creature lifted his shoulders in a shrug. Her frown deepened. Young whelplings sometimes had strange ideas. It was true, but in the broodlands they did not need to fear predation like they did in the wilds. The ordered dragons raised their young communally, and the red dragonflight ensured that all whelplings were cared for, loved, and protected. From what Vyranoth understood, parents were allowed to be as involved or uninvolved in their offspring lives as they wanted. Red dragons lounged on ledges overhead, while Draconid patrolled the ravines and kept a watchful eye on the whelplings. No predators could get close to the little ones. At least nothing large enough to hurt them. So why are they afraid? "You are safe in the broodlands," Vyranoth told the whelplings, nudging Alexstrasza with her snout. He clung to her leg. "Nothing will hurt you here." Alexstrasza turned up his golden eyes to look at her. The trust in his expression melted her heart just a little. "There are creatures that hide in the rocks. I've seen them. They took me when I was little." "Took you?" Vyranoth asked. "Took you from where?" "From home," Alexstrasza replied. "Come now," Vyranoth said gently. The conversation put her nerves on Talon's edge. Eyes in the rocks? Whelplings who believe they've been kidnapped? You have nothing to fear. Alexstrasza shook his head. "Fine, I'll hide," Rigo said, shooting a little puff of arcane fire at Alexstrasza. Despite her concerns, Vyranoth spent the rest of her very happy afternoon with the whelplings, playing their invented games, watching them hunt bugs, and asking them about their lives in the broodlands. She tried to cajole Alexstrasza and Alexstrasza to tell her more of their fears, but both whelplings just squeezed their eyes shut and shook their heads. Truth be told, any number of things could have happened to the siblings, from getting lost in a dark cave to an encounter with something scary. None of the other whelplings Vyranoth encountered suffered the same distress. Whether green or black, bronze, blue, or red, most of the whelplings Vyranoth met were boisterous and content, far more so than they might have been in the dragon wilds even. As the sun fell toward the horizon, Vyranoth said her goodbye to the whelplings, and Alexstrasza returned to the waking shores. "Vyranoth," Alexstrasza said, landing on the river bank. The whelplings squealed in delight when they saw the queen, and she smiled at them as they swarmed around her and perched on her horns. "I must apologize. Today's business took me away for far longer than I thought it would. Our half-giant neighbors aren't particularly friendly and continue to vex us." "There is no need for an apology," Vyranoth replied, lifting her head. Three whelplings still clung to her mane, begging for one last game. "I spent a lovely afternoon with the whelplings, but now I must be going." "I am forever pulled away by my duties," Alexstrasza said with a sigh, lowering her head to allow the draconid to collect the protesting whelps. "At the very least, I can fly with you to the borders of the broodlands." "I would like that," Vyranoth said. As they flew west, dusk drew her great comforting wings over the sky. The stars blinked awake, one by one. In the distance the great forges of Nelthurin's citadel burned bright, and though Vyranoth enjoyed the day, she wanted nothing more than to leave the broodlands and return to the familiar icy halls of her home in the north. The two dragons paused at the border to say goodbyes. "I wish you would stay," Alexstrasza said. "I can feel the loneliness in your heart, Vyranoth. Ordered or not, you are always welcome among us. My idea for the ruby life pools came from the days we spent defending our clutches from Galakrond. It came from you. Nothing would make me happier than to see you stay." A pang of longing resonated through Vyranoth's chest. How she wished they could go back to that less complicated time when dragons were dragons and their lives were full of simple joys and known dangers. For when Vyranoth came to visit the broodlands, Alexstrasza barely had time for her. The responsibilities of leadership weighed heavily on the Dragon Queen. Everything had changed, everything except Vyranoth. Like the great glaciers to the north, she moved with deliberate slowness, taking years and sometimes decades to make up her mind. "I cannot," Vyranoth said. "You have built something truly extraordinary in the broodlands, Alexstrasza, but there is no place for me here, much as I wish there were." "That is not true," Alexstrasza said, clutching her forefeet into fist. It was something she had always done when despairing. "Vyranoth, there is room enough for you in the broodlands. There is room enough for everyone." Vyranoth beat her wings, hovering in the air. "But you would not take me as I am, not truly. I would be forced to submit to the Keeper's order magic to be a part of your flights." "I have shown you our achievements, our city and towers, our forges and gardens," Alexstrasza said, her voice choked. "You have sat with the aspects, played with our whelplings, flown with our finest, and shared meals with my own family. What more must I do, Vyranoth, to help you understand? You are one of my oldest and dearest friends. I want you by my side. The horizon grows ever darker, and I do not wish to face it without you. For the space of a heartbeat, Vyranoth felt herself being taken away by the emotion of the moment. She saw the path displayed before her, a community, a mate, whelplings, but at what cost? It would be so easy to compromise her beliefs, to trade them for happiness. But she would have to live with that happiness in a different skin. Whatever brood she had would be yoked to that choice. Vyranoth would not make that choice for them. In the flights they owed something to the keepers, the defense of the world, or so they said. In practice, Vyranoth feared it would mean relinquishing herself for the greater good. It would mean giving up the ice in her veins and the wind under her wings. And that was not a sacrifice she was willing to make. She was Vyranoth, now and always. No one would take that from her, not even her oldest, dearest friend. I'm sorry, Alexstrasza, Vyranoth said. I cannot follow you towards that horizon. And with that she closed her wings and dived for the border, leaving Alexstrasza alone in the skies. She thought she heard the Dragon Queen call her name, but Vyranoth did not turn back. For several turns of the moons, Vyranoth tried not to think of that day at the Ruby Life Pools, nor how Alexstrasza had asked her to join the 5 flights. She could not imagine allowing Titan magic to change her, even if it would allow her to stay by Alexstrasza's side. The keepers found Vyranoth and her primal kin wanting. They found the whole of the world wanting, which was why they forced their order upon it. But the planet was already perfect in its innate beauty. Why should it be forced to submit to the Titan's whims? Why should Alexstrasza and her flights hold the Titan's views so much higher than those of their own kind? After all, hadn't the illustrious Tyr failed to defeat Galakrond? Hadn't 5 primal dragons working together found a way to fell that beast? And if Vyranoth knew the story true, why did Alexstrasza feel she needed the Titan's power at all? Had her own strength not proven sufficient? These were the thoughts that rolled in Vyranoth's mind, day in and day out, as seasons passed. While she could certainly understand the aspect's desire for greater power, it seemed naive to trust the keepers. Hadn't the Titan Forge trapped and captured primal dragons in the north? Even if Alexstrasza and the other aspects had fought to free those poor creatures, the damage had been done. It was obvious the Titans and their creation saw dragonkind as little more than servants, or worse, as thralls. Perhaps that's why the flight's oaths gave Vyranoth such pause. She would not serve a force she neither knew or understood. Could Alexstrasza say truthfully that her keepers would never ask her to do something she disagreed with? And if it came to that, what then? One afternoon, Vyranoth could not sit these thoughts any longer. She left her area and took wing. The cold, icy gales that whipped around the peaks were a panacea to her, easing her troubled heart and chasing away her doubts. Overhead the clouds rumbled and roiled. Webs of lightning raced along their bellies, an unusual sight this far north, where the air was usually too cold to produce such phenomena. The snows had yet to fall, but she could sense the blizzard swirling in the skies above. Vyranoth reveled in the storm that twirled around the mountain tops, enjoying the fierce frozen day. The sheer power of the storm was a delight, and perhaps in one dark, small corner of her heart, Vyranoth could understand why Alexstrasza might seek a stronger wind under her wings. Regardless, the Dragon Queen should have sought such power from the world itself, not from an external force. As Vyranoth soared around one of the peaks enjoying the wind in her mane, a familiar voice thundered in the clouds. Vyranoth, I did not realize you enjoyed chasing the gales. Is that you, Razageth? Vyranoth halted, turning her attention skyward. It wasn't unusual for the incarnate to follow the winds across the dragon wilds. With a laugh like the crackle of lightning, a large primal dragon dipped from the clouds. For a dragon so young, Razageth nearly matched Vyranoth in size. Part of that was due to having been imbued with the very element of storm, no doubt. Rumors said the storm eater was capricious, volatile, but Vyranoth had never sensed any malice from the incarnate. On the contrary, Razageth seemed to exude a wild, gleeful feeling that Vyranoth had experienced little of late. Who else but me, Razageth said, tossing her head. Sparks snapped between her 4 great horns. Hope you did not mind the unannounced intrusion. I'm here to follow the storm, and nothing else. But since you are here, would you like to fly with me? Fly with you? Vyranoth said, giving her wings great beat to rise higher in the skies. And where shall we go? Anywhere we want, Razageth said with a grin. Let us see how great a gale we can whip up with our wings. Let us make the greatest of blizzards to shake the sky. It sounded like the right sort of distraction to take Vyranoth's mind off the concern that had tormented her for so long. So with a nod of her head, she followed Razageth into the maelstrom. They spent a thrilling afternoon racing around the peaks, stirring the storm into a frenzy. The winds howled in Vyranoth's ears and tore at her wings. They ducked and dived, spiraling through the storm. The snows raged, each flake sharp enough to shred a lesser dragon's wings. Lightning arced through the sky, answering the incarnate's call. Razageth challenged Vyranoth to wild, death-defying games. They would plunge towards the ground, and the last to halt their descent would be declared the victor. Vyranoth lost this game every time. She was far more cautious than the Storm Eater. However, Vyranoth often bested the incarnate in breakneck races through the peaks, sometimes dodging past greater bolts of lightning to win. Razageth was not trying to harm her, but the incarnate wasn't afraid of alarming the older dragon either. Despite the chill of the storm and her companion's rather unnerving penchant for danger, Vyranoth's blood burned in her veins. Her heart pounded in her chest. She could not recall a time in which she had felt so alive. Not in many, many long years. No, not just alive, liberated. Free. She stopped thinking about her loneliness, about the aspects in the incarnates, and about their keepers and their loathsome order magic. She stopped thinking, stopped worrying, and just lived. As the day began to die, Vyranoth and Razageth let the storm ebb. They landed on a ledge north of Vyranoth's eyrie, watching the wind settle and the snows drift away. You realize that you could become as I am, Razageth said, giving her a head shake, incarnate, ever powerful. Did Eroticron tell you to say that to me? Vyranoth said without malice. No, Razageth said, chuckling. I merely sense that you are a kindred spirit. I have friends in all the far-flung corners of the world, but few of them revel in the storm as you do. Fewer still can bear the wrath of my maelstroms. Vyranoth turned her head to the sky, watching the storm continue to ease with a gentle snowfall. It has been many long years since I have felt so free. Perhaps that is because you are listening to your instincts rather than fighting them, Razageth said. Can you imagine how much more free you'd feel if you were being imbued with the elements? It is dangerous, very dangerous, but I believe you have what it takes to embrace the elements and master their powers, should you so choose. The question gave Vyranoth pause, then Razageth continued, However, it matters not what you are to me, so long as you love the storm. Vyranoth's breath caught in her throat, but otherwise she made no outward signs of surprise. Friends? Just like that, Vyranoth thought. Vyranoth barely knew Razageth, but perhaps there was kinship there forged in storm, and understanding and acceptance. Friends, Vyranoth said with a nod. The incarnate grinned. Come then, she said, launching herself back into the air. I will show you stronger winds, and we shall truly fly free.